Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode. Um, today, today we are talking about Enrique Rios and Elijah Moore, and this case it's incredibly sad. I'm sure you've probably heard of it. Oh, who did it? A video on this that I know. I believe Danielle Howland. She did a really good video on this. But I've seen other videos. That's just what I remember off the top of my head. And it's so sad. And I hope that I do it justice. Um, we kind of have answers at the end, but not really. You'll see if you're not familiar with it. But before we get started, all of my links that I use for research will be down below, like always. There will also be a link to a case suggestions form. If there is someone that you want me to talk about, there's just gonna have some information that you need to fill out just so that I can familiarize myself with the case and know like what I'm getting into. And yeah. And I hope you enjoyed. I don't know if enjoyed's the right word, considering what they're about, but I don't know what the right word would be. I hope that, okay, I guess you've enjoyed them. I hope you've enjoyed them. Um, and also, the first 3 episodes, if you haven't seen them that I've dropped for this podcast, I did drop them early, but all episodes will drop on Sundays. I dropped them a little bit earlier. I didn't want to wait 10 days after I did my teaser video, which I ended up deleting. But let's go ahead and get into this video. So, Enrique Rios, a Hispanic male from Esparto, California, was reported missing by his mother on Wednesday, October 19th, 2016, and he was last seen at 9 p.m. on Sunday, October 16th, in his family's home. He was also born January 2nd, 2000, so he's actually a couple years younger than I am. Elijah Moore, a black male from Woodland, California, was reported missing by his mother on Monday, November 6th, 2016, and Elijah was last seen on Friday, November 4th, 2016. He attended school and later cashed a check at California Check Cashing, located at 115 Main Street in Woodland. On the day of his disappearance, he was last seen wearing a black hooded sweatshirt, a yellow shirt, khaki pants, and tan work boots. He also carried a green backpack, and he was born on November 3rd, 1999. So we have 2 minors that have disappeared under mysterious circumstances, about 3 weeks apart. They were close friends. Enrique and Elijah knew each other. They went to the same school. They participated in the same program, Northern California Construction Training. Enrique Rios was 17 at the time, and he was a student at Cesar Chavez Community School in Woodland. And he left his home after sneaking out of his house after saying goodnight to his family in the small farming town of Esparto. And it was only 25 days later that his friend would also be last seen, and that's when he was cashing his check. So, this case is really weird because we feel like we know it happened, but the people that did it kind of change it up. So, I'm trying to go in a way where this is presumably what happened. Sorry. Then we'll get into the people getting arrested and then what they had to say about it, because it's a lot. So it's just kind of confusing, so try to stay with me. So this is why it's believed that they went missing, and that is because Elijah allegedly robbed 3 men of 3 ounces of marijuana. And I only saw this like maybe once or twice, so take that with a grain of salt, but I wanted to include it just in case. And it's believed that Enrique was said to have been targeted due to his friendship with Elijah, and they are believed to have been murdered in Knight's Landing, but their bodies have not been found. A Texas search and rescue group has been continuously searching for them, but like I said, there's like nothing's been found of them. So although they haven't been found, 4 people have been arrested accused of murder, conspiracy, and kidnapping. And among those are Shondell Shannon Jr., 21 of Winters, Jesus Campos, 18 of Woodland, and Jonathan, I believe it's Frost or Frosty, of Knight's Landing. So Jesus Campos was arraigned in juvenile court, quote, because at the time of the crime he was a juvenile. And Campos is being held on suspicion of murder, conspiracy, and kidnapping. Mr. Shannon is being charged with murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Mr. Frost or Frosty, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, is being charged with murder, accessory, and kidnapping. Woodland Police Lieutenant Aaron DeLao, sorry, I cannot pronounce things, I'm so sorry, said since early in the investigation that they have been pursuing a number of different avenues and tips that have been coming in. And he says, quote, "These three have been looked at. We've conducted a number of interviews with them during the last 19 months, but he declined to specify the evidence against the suspects. But it is leading them to explore them. And we will get more into what that evidence is because, my God, it's just chilling. But they were persons of interest, and at one point they did become suspects. So that's what we're given at first. So because of various testimonies given at various court dates, since this all started happening, we are getting more and more details. So the event that started the series of all of the events was that Elijah Moore allegedly robbed David and Shondell Shannon of 3 ounces of marijuana in a KFC parking lot off of Main Street. Jesus Campos was with them at the time, according to testimony. Unable to find Moore, the trio contacted an unsuspecting Rios and took him to a remote area of Knight's Landing. When he wouldn't help them locate Moore, Rios was shot multiple times by David, including once as he attempted to run away. Weeks later, the group got their hands on Moore. According to testimony, Campos lured him to the car they were using in another Woodland parking lot, and Moore agreed to get in the trunk and be driven to the, quote, sticks, walking home as his punishment. Joined this time by Jonathan, they took Moore to Knight's Landing, where he was beaten repeatedly by a baseball bat-sized branch and shot. Their bodies were buried in the rural community, and though searches continued, neither have been recovered. And Rios was just 16 at the time, and Moore had just celebrated his 17th birthday. So the prosecution's case, which actually lacks a lot of physical evidence tying Frost or Frosty, I'll just go by Frost, to the crime, is based on incriminating statements by David Frost and co-defendants Jonathan Frost, Jesus Campos, and Shondell Shannon Jr., according to Davis Enterprise Reports, which is an article. So, social media activity and cell phone data was put into evidence to show their locations and movements during the teens' last known appearances. Yolo County Prosecutor Jay Linden described David Frost as the ringleader of the group, a description disputed by his lawyer, Martha Sequeira. Jonathan Frost, David's brother, pleaded no contest to second-degree murder in exchange for his testimony. Tried separately from the others, David Frost was convicted of both murders in the fall of 2018 and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. So, Jesus Campos, a Woodland man, was ordered to stand trial for the murder, and he was 20 when he was ordered to stand trial. Underwent a preliminary hearing in Yolo Superior Court, where Judge David Rosenberg found there was sufficient evidence for the charges to stand. A minor at the time of the charged crimes, Campos had his case elevated from juvenile to adult court, and he has pleaded not guilty to the allegations that he was involved in the killings. So Shondell, I think it's Shondell, Shannon, was 22 when they were finally found mentally competent to stand trial, and this was after a year of suspended proceedings, and they finally appeared in court. So it was for the second time a psychologist found Shannon mentally competent, clearing the way for his anticipated plea deal. He was actually on the verge of admitting his role in the disappearances and the presumed deaths at the time, when his attorney, Bob Spangler, declared in court that, quote, "I don't believe that he can appropriately participate in the proceedings as they stand now," end quote. His attorney did not elaborate, but because of his words, that would prompt the Superior Court Judge, David Rosenberg, to suspend Shannon's criminal case pending a psychological evaluation. And this same thing happened back in 2019 when Spangler questioned Shannon's mental health status the first time around. So both times, a court-appointed psychologist found Shannon mentally competent, meaning he understands the nature of his court proceedings and can assist his attorney in the case. Spangler did not dispute a psychologist's latest findings during the court hearing. And then they had, at the time, requested a proceeding for Shannon to change his not guilty plea in the case. And this agreement calls for Shondell Shannon to admit to counts of first-degree murder and voluntary manslaughter. Why did I say it like that? Manslaughter in exchange for a state prison term of 36 years to life. And that is what he would get. In an interview that Shondell Shannon did, he claimed that he was, quote, "just a witness that didn't call the police," end quote, which, listen, witness or not, it's all bad. Even I get that they're your friends. I do. I get it. But if you see them kill someone, be a snitch, okay? Just be a snitch. But he went on to say that he didn't have anything to do with the actual murders. Like, he just witnessed it, which, yeah, sure, okay. According to Deputy District Attorney David Wilson, the plea agreement that was on the table was a counteroffer made by attorney Bob Spangler to an original offer of 40 years to life. DDA Wilson continued to explain the back and forth of the negotiations, noting that in the end, quote, we were open and willing to accept a 36 to life sentence. I met with both victims' mothers on multiple occasions to discuss the pros and the cons, and reluctantly, they were willing to agree to that kind of plea deal, end quote. Judge Rosenberg asked DDA Wilson to describe exactly what Shannon may be risking if he decided to go forward with trial instead of taking the plea agreement. And, quote, if the jury was to find a combination of 2 first-degree murders or a combination of a first and a second, the multiple murders enhancement, independent of the kidnapping special circumstance, makes the defendant eligible for life without the possibility of parole, as explained by DDA Wilson. So that was his explanation to the judge, what would happen. He also explained that Shannon could receive life without parole if he was convicted of one murder and the kidnapping enhancement was applied, showing the multitude of ways that the court might be forced to give him a much steeper penalty than what the plea agreement gave. So the plea agreement was a much better decision for him, basically. The final aspect that DDA Wilson expanded on was that under a penal code that applies to youthful offenders, Shondell would be able to have a parole hearing after 25 years so long as his sentence is not life without possibility of parole. But Shannon would refuse the plea deal. Quote, at various points in the last 6 or 7 weeks, Mr. Shannon has evinced a willingness to enter into that plea agreement. I would not have tendered it if that wasn't the case. However, having spoken with Mr. Shannon this morning, he is, at least as of this morning, not willing to go forward with it. And after a brief aside, Attorney Spangler said that Shannon remained adamant about his desire to go to trial. So moving on to Jonathan, or J. Frosty. And this was in a Jailhouse interview that he would break his public silence about the night of Elijah Moore's murder, hours after pleading no contest to second-degree murder for his role in Elijah's death, and the plea deal calls for him to cooperate fully with the Yolo County District Attorney's Office in its prosecution of the 3 other defendants. So we're going to get into his Jailhouse interview, what he says happened, Jonathan, and all that good stuff. So according to terms of the agreement read aloud by Yolo Superior Court Judge David Rosenberg, prosecutors extended the plea offer after J. Frost made 2 good faith efforts to help the authorities locate the teen's remains, which still have not been found, in exchange for his full, complete, and truthful testimony. and he would be sentenced at a later date to 15 years to life in state prison, and prosecutors will not actively oppose his parole when he becomes eligible for release. His attorney, Ava Landers, said her client has significant remorse and desperately wanted to give the victims' families closure if he could. So now we're going to get into what, according to Jonathan or Jay Frost, says happened to them. So moments before he died, Elijah Moore asked his killers for one last phone call to his mother so he could tell her that he loved her. And David said no, according to Jonathan, referring to David, his older brother and co-defendant of the murders of Elijah and Enrique. He reportedly, this is what David was saying, David reportedly told the 17-year-old to pray instead. Later, David allegedly took a tree branch and struck Moore in the head, as did Jonathan and two other suspects, in retaliation for a marijuana robbery that Elijah had committed several weeks before. I'm sorry, this is just making me really emotional. Sorry. So he actually started his interview by reading a letter to the victims' mothers, which he had written several days before this. And this is gonna start the letter, quote, to the mothers of those boys. No amount of apologies or sorries can ever fix what has been done or can bring back your children. Justice will be served, and I will pay for my crimes. I know I took more than a human. I took someone's son, brother, cousin, nephew, grandson, and friend from this world, and now more than ever do I see the damage that I caused. I pray that I will be able to make up for my choices and be able to give back to the world. Nothing will be able to bring back those boys, and nothing will be able to replace a life in this world. He would also go on to acknowledge that he made the plea deal to avoid exposure to the death penalty or life in prison without the possibility of parole, which were both potential sentences that he faced under the original charges filed against him. And he would say, quote, when it comes down to your brother or yourself, you have to choose yourself, end quote. Because at the time that he said this, his brother David was not aware that he had made a plea deal. I'm sorry, I'm just getting really emotional about it. He recalled getting a phone call from his brother on the night of October 17th, 2016, shortly after Elijah Moore, an acquaintance of all four defendants, robbed David Frost at gunpoint of 3 ounces of marijuana valued at $300. I remember him being really angry about being robbed. He said he wanted to go shoot up Elijah's house and go look for him. It was about putting a gun to David. That's why he wanted to kill him. They came to me, and Shondell brought up Enrique to David. And Shondell said, Enrique is Elijah's friend. He was pissed about Elijah putting a gun to him too. Shondell is the reason that Enrique was killed. So, in an interview following his arrest, Shannon actually said that David used his cell phone to pose as Shannon, inviting Rios via text message to party, quote. They picked him up at his Esparto home and drove him to a beach along the Sacramento River in Knights Landing, where Shannon and David fatally shot Rios after the teen refused to learn more to them. Jonathan Frost said he saw his brother and Shannon the following day, and that, quote, they said that they had killed Enrique. David told me that when he was taking a shower, he was remembering Enrique screaming before he died. He seemed to feel bad that he had killed someone just for being someone else's friend. That's what I gathered. But he still wanted to kill Elijah too. Elijah Moore is believed to have died on November 4th, 2016, when he vanished after cashing his check. Jonathan said he, his brother, and Jesus Campos were sitting in Jay Frost's rental vehicle at Purity Plaza, a shopping center not far from the check cashing business, when Elijah crossed their path. Jesus pointed out the teen to David, who got out of the car and confronted him. Quote, he told Elijah that if he gets in the trunk, his punishment for the robbery was to walk home from someplace far away. End quote. Although other accounts of the encounter have David armed with a pair of scissors at the time, Jonathan said his brother in fact, was empty-handed as Elijah climbed into the trunk. David then instructed his brother to drive to Shannon's then residence in Woodland, as Shannon was in possession of the gun that was used to kill Rios. Jonathan goes on to say, quote, David told him, "Give me the gun, Elijah's in the trunk." End quote. Although Shannon denied any involvement in Moore's killing during his interview, Jonathan said he, quote, wanted to be part of it. He got in the car and drove with us, end quote. From Woodland, they headed to a rural area outside Knight's Landing, where, according to Jonathan, his brother handed his gun to Shannon, who also was held at gunpoint during the marijuana robbery, quote, so he can get the satisfaction of putting a gun to Elijah, end quote. David then ordered Elijah out of the trunk, bound his wrists with a zip tie, and told Elijah that he's going to be buried next to Enrique. And he continued to say, I want you to pray before I get back. And according to Jonathan, who was with Shondell, was left to guard Elijah as David and Jesus went to go get supplies, garbage bags, shovels, bleach, and gasoline. When the others returned, David told Elijah, I'm sorry your prayers couldn't save you. And that is when the 4 defendants took turns striking Elijah with a tree branch until he died. Jonathan said his brother then shot the teen just to make sure he was dead before they buried his body. Afterward, the 4 of them stripped down to their underwear and tossed their clothes into a garbage bag so that nothing touched the inside of the car. They burned the clothing, then drove back to Woodland. They paused on a drawbridge outside Knight's Landing so that David could toss their tools into the water below. Then they dined at Denny's in Woodland, paying for their meals with money that he had taken from Elijah. Jonathan hasn't been able to find the burial site since then, despite repeated efforts to lead authorities there. He remembers only that there was a wall of trees, a house in the distance, and a hill that prevented their car from being seen from the road. And that's all I've got for you. I wasn't able to find final verdicts for Jesus or Shondell. I don't know if that's because it hasn't been released, or maybe I just wasn't looking in the right places. I scoured the internet and I just could not find, like, for sure this is what they got. Or maybe it's still going on. I'm not sure. But I will update you if I can find anything. But yeah, that is everything I have for you. And it's heartbreaking that these 2 young teenagers were murdered over basically $300. And I know you'd be like, yeah, well, Elijah pulled out a gun on David, which, no, that's not smart. You shouldn't pull out a gun on anyone. But I still don't believe that that's a reason to murder anyone by any means. And to just kill Enrique because he's friends with Elijah is so stupid. But Enrique was Elijah's friend to the end and would not give him up. It's just heartbreaking that was their fate. I hope that their families, their mothers, they can find peace. I know it must be hard every day. Because this was only 5 years ago? even though it's been a few years isn't a lot, so I know it must hurt them every day, and I am so sorry if they see this about your sons, and I know that sorry can't bring them back, but I hope that these monsters being put away can help you in some way. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys. Like I said, I'm really sorry to their families, and hopefully one day their bodies can be found, because they deserve a proper burial and to be where their families can go and visit them. So I'm gonna end this here. I'm sorry, I'm just really trying not to cry, so I'm gonna end this here. Like I said, my links that I use for research will be down below. Go and read up on some of them yourself, and if you have a case you'd like me to talk about, please submit it to the case suggestions form in the description as well, and I will see you guys next Sunday. Thank you for listening to Enrique and Elijah Stories, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.